At some point in the early hours of March 11th, nobody agrees exactly when because there were so many sirens that Israelis stopped counting. A notification arrived on millions of Israeli mobile phones. It was not from the Home Front Command. It was not from the IDF. It was not a government alert. The message was signed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, in plain text sent directly to Israeli civilian phones. It said, "Your government is lying to you. Missiles are on their way. No shelter can keep you safe." That message arrived in the middle of the longest sustained overnight missile barrage Tel Aviv had experienced since this war began. For approximately 3 hours, Iranian ballistic missiles and drones arrived in waves over central Israel. Sirens did not stop long enough for people to return to their beds. Families went to shelters and stayed there not for minutes, but for hours. Buildings across Tel Aviv sustained damage. Vehicles on the streets filled with the residue of explosions and falling debris. When dawn came, millions of Israelis had not slept. That was the point. This is the dimension of this war that most people have not fully understood because it does not produce the dramatic satellite images of a destroyed building or the clear headline of a military objective achieved. It produces something slower and more corrosive: exhaustion, sleep deprivation, the psychological unraveling of a civilian population that cannot predict when the next siren will sound, cannot trust that the shelter they run to is safe, and cannot turn to their phones for information without finding an IRGC message telling them their own leaders are deceiving them. Israeli analysts quoted across multiple outlets have been explicit about what Iran is doing. It is not trying to destroy Tel Aviv. It is trying to destroy the Israeli government's ability to keep its own people willing to endure. The Al Jazeera correspondent in the West Bank reported this verbatim, that Iran's strategy is to keep millions of Israelis in shelters throughout the night, creating political pressure so intense that the Israeli government loses the domestic mandate to continue the war. Iran does not need to win on the battlefield. It needs Israel's citizens to decide that no military objective is worth this. To understand why this strategy has intensified so dramatically in the last 48 hours, why the warheads are getting heavier, why the overnight barrages are getting longer, why the psychological operations have escalated to direct text messages on Israeli civilian phones, you need to understand who is giving the orders now. On March 8th, Mojtaba Khamenei was confirmed as Iran's new supreme leader. He is 55 years old. He has never held public office. He has no formal military title in his background. He inherited a war he did not start, commanding a military apparatus that has already burned through a significant portion of its ballistic missile stockpile against an adversary with American air power, Israeli intelligence networks, and the most sophisticated air defense architecture in the Middle East. And he is the son of a man who was killed by American and Israeli bombs on the first day of that war, along with his mother, his sister, his daughter, his niece, his brother-in-law, and his son-in-law. Every close family member killed in a single strike. The IRGC, according to multiple Iranian military sources and reporting by outlets tracking the conflict, has confirmed a decision made after Mojtaba took command. No future missile attack on Israel will use a warhead smaller than 1 metric ton. The overnight barrage on March 11th included warheads of 2 metric tons, 2,000 kilos of explosive delivered by a single ballistic missile into one of the most densely populated urban areas on Earth. For context, the warhead that collapsed the civilian bomb shelter in Beth Shemesh on March 1st, the strike that killed 9 people even inside a reinforced underground structure, weighed approximately 500 kilonewtons. Mojtaba's first command decision was to quadruple the minimum destructive payload of every missile Iran fires at Israel. That is not a military calculation. That is a grieving man with access to a ballistic missile arsenal making a decision that every military strategist in the world is now watching. Because the gap between personal vengeance and strategic discipline is where wars become uncontrollable. The text message on Israeli civilian phones was not a random escalation. The heavier warheads were not a random escalation. The 3-hour overnight barrage was not a random escalation. Mojtaba Khamenei has inherited a war, a military, and a grief that has no diplomatic equivalent. And for 12 days now, Israel and America have been absorbing what that combination produces. One city block at a time, one sleepless night at a time, one text message at a time. The information war, running alongside the physical war, is something neither government wants you to examine too closely because both sides are fighting it. Both sides are losing control of it. And the gap between what both governments are saying and what is actually happening has become one of the defining features of this conflict. Begin with what Iran did to Israeli phones. The IRGC mass text to Israeli civilians was not a single incident. It was the escalation point of an information campaign that has been running since day one. The Jerusalem Post and Israel's National Cyber Directorate both confirmed that since the war began, Iranian actors and pro-Iranian hacker groups have conducted over 2,000 threatening communications targeting Israeli institutions. Cybersecurity firm Radware reported a 700% surge in malicious activity within the first 48 hours of the war, DOS attacks, infiltration attempts against critical infrastructure, data theft, and malware distribution. The Cyber Directorate warned Israelis specifically about fake text messages claiming shelter attacks were imminent, urging civilians to stay out of bomb shelters. A direct attempt to make Israelis choose between the risk of a missile and the risk of a message telling them the shelter was the danger. The IRGC's mass text message, signed in its own name, sent in Hebrew claiming that American radar systems had been destroyed and that no shelter was safe, represented the shift from anonymous cyber operations to overt psychological operations. Iran stopped hiding behind anonymous actors and put its own institutional name on a message delivered to Israeli civilian phones during an active missile barrage. Israel has run the same operation in reverse. On the first day of the war, Israel co-opted a popular Iranian religious calendar app, the Bates Saba app, with more than 5 million downloads, and sent mass notifications to Iranian phones urging IRGC soldiers and regular army members to desert. The era of the dictators is over. Do not sacrifice your lives for a regime that has already fallen. Lay down your arms. That operation, reported by the Wall Street Journal, was designed to maximize defections from Iran's military in the first hours of the war, before the regime could regain communication control. Neither operation has achieved its stated goal. Iranian troops did not defect in significant numbers. Israeli civilians did not abandon shelters based on fake IRGC texts, but both operations have done something else. They have created an environment in which both populations no longer fully trust any information reaching them from their own governments, from the other side, from their phones, from official channels. In a war where managing civilian resolve is as important as battlefield outcomes, that trust collapse is itself a strategic weapon. Now look at what is happening inside that information vacuum on the American side. Trump called the Iran war a short-term excursion in a press conference in Doral, Florida on March 9th. He said it would be over very soon. He told the Times of Israel that the decision to end the war would be mutual between himself and Netanyahu. Israeli media, including the Jerusalem Post, immediately noted that the phrase "very much complete," used by Trump, raised some concerns among Israeli officials about alignment between Washington and Jerusalem on war objectives. Multiple American media outlets, Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, have all separately reported that the Pentagon is undercounting American casualties. The number of confirmed U.S. soldiers killed publicly stands at 7. Anonymous U.S. officials and military sources speaking to reporters suggest the true number is significantly higher, with many additional wounded who are being categorized in ways that do not trigger public reporting requirements. A senior defense analyst quoted in Reuters said bluntly that the reported numbers do not match the operational picture from bases across the Gulf. Iran's President Pezeshkian made Trump's unconditional surrender demand the center of his public response. The Iranian people, he said, would take that demand to its grave. Iran's foreign minister, Araghchi, posted on social media calling the U.S. operation an epic mistake, and said Iran has many surprises in store. The IRGC confirmed publicly that its drone and missile factories have been ordered to operate at double capacity, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, building the stockpile back as fast as combat operations consume it. And through all of this, through the contradictory statements, the undercounted casualties, the heavier warheads, the text messages on civilian phones, the Trump press conference calling a war entering its second week a short-term excursion, the people of Israel are running to shelters at 3 in the morning and finding on their phones when they get there a message from Iran telling them their government is lying. The information war is not a sideshow. It is the war inside the war. And right now, nobody's winning it cleanly. Let us be direct about what the next phase of this war looks like, because the signals are all pointing in the same direction, and neither government is being honest with their own people about where this goes. Iran has declared publicly through the IRGC that it has the capacity to sustain this war at its current intensity for at least 6 months. That is not a boast. It is a strategic declaration of endurance designed to communicate to Washington that any timeline Trump announces publicly for ending the war will be met with Iranian operations that contradict it. Trump says, very soon, Iran fires 3 hours of missiles at Tel Aviv overnight. Trump says, short-term excursion. Iran sends text messages to Israeli civilian phones at 3 in the morning. The gap between the presidential statement and the operational reality is being filled by Iran deliberately in real time. The economic pressure on Israel is documented and accelerating. Netanyahu and Finance Minister Smotrich issued a joint statement on March 10th, saying the war requires a special budget of tens of billions of shekels, a figure that Israel's current fiscal architecture cannot absorb without significant restructuring. Smotrich announced the temporary suspension of multiple legislative priorities, including the ultra-Orthodox draft exemption law to focus resources on the war effort. Israel is a country of approximately 9.5 million people. It cannot sustain a total war footing indefinitely without economic consequences that cascade through every sector of its society. Israeli airlines have stopped publishing flight schedules. The airports are effectively closed to normal commercial traffic. Israelis with means to leave are heading to airports and finding no departures. Israelis without means are staying in apartments that may have no safe rooms, running to public shelters and waking up to find an IRGC message on their phone telling them the shelter was not safe either. The Israeli government's position officially is that this war is on schedule, objectives are being achieved, and Iranian military capability is being systematically degraded. The evidence supports some of this. U.S. CENTCOM confirmed that Iranian ballistic missile launches dropped approximately 90% from day 1 to day 6, the result of Israeli and American strikes destroying over 300 Iranian mobile missile launchers. Iran's navy has been described by the White House as combat ineffective after American forces sank more than 50 Iranian naval vessels. B-2 stealth bombers dropped bunker-penetrating munitions on deeply buried Iranian missile sites, but the rate of launches dropping 90% from 90 per day still means launches happening every day. Missiles are still reaching Tel Aviv. Cluster warheads are still scattering submunitions across central Israeli neighborhoods. Overnight barrages are still preventing millions of people from sleeping. And Iran, according to its own public statements and the factory orders that have been confirmed, is building new missiles and drones as fast as it fires the ones it has. Washington Post reporting confirmed that a few senior Israeli officials have begun asking privately how this war ends. They are not calling for surrender. They are asking a question that has no official answer. What does Israeli victory actually look like? And is the current military campaign producing it? The U.S. military's stated position is that it needs 4 to 6 weeks to achieve its objectives. Its objectives, as stated by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, are destroy Iran's missile program, ensure Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon, and end Iranian proxy capability to destabilize the region. None of those objectives has a clear military finish line. Destroying every missile launcher in Iran is not the same as destroying Iran's capacity to build more. Preventing nuclear weapons acquisition is a permanent monitoring requirement, not a one-time military outcome. Ending proxy capability requires either regime change or a durable political agreement, neither of which is currently on the table, because Iran's new supreme leader is not negotiating, and America's demand of unconditional surrender has been rejected publicly and repeatedly by every Iranian official with a microphone. Mojtaba Khamenei has now been supreme leader for 4 days. In that time, he has ordered heavier warheads. He has authorized overnight barrages. He has not reached out to any mediator. He has not signaled any interest in any ceasefire under any terms. He has, according to the IRGC's own public statements, given standing orders to sustain the war at maximum intensity. A man who lost his entire family in a single airstrike, holding the command authority over the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East, with 3 nuclear powers backing him and his factories running double shift, is the person that America and Israel need to either defeat or negotiate with. There is no third option in this war. The text messages will keep coming. The missiles will keep flying. The overnight sirens will keep sounding. And in the shelters of Tel Aviv, on the phones of families who have not slept through the night since February 28th, the screen will keep lighting up with messages from a man who has nothing left to lose and everything left to